Alpine are probably best known as the performance division of Renault and for their Formula 1 team that has been frequently in the news. Their leadership seems chaotic, but don't let this take away from the success of the brand. The A110 is often credited as being one of the best sports cars on the market, and it beats almost everything at its price point. The story of Alpine hasn't always been an easy ride though, as since being bought by Renault in 1973, they were merged, the name was phased out, and they simply became a manufacturer of sporty Renault models. So how are they now thriving, and what is their future after putting forward their electrification plans and partnering with Lotus? This is the story of Alpine. Jean Redelet had a Renault dealership in Dieppe in northern France. He was the youngest dealer in the country after receiving a business degree, and in 1950 he started rallying between Dieppe and Rouen in a Renault 4CV. He later modified it with a new gearbox and aluminium bodies, but he began on a grassroots level. He won his first race and he began racing in the Alps, where he had success, which led to his cars having the Alpine name on them. He founded Alpine on the 22nd of June 1955 in Dieppe. The A106 was Alpine's first car. It was based on the 4CV. The glass fibre body and stiff chassis saved weight, and the optional 5-speed manual gearbox made it unique, as very few other cars had more than 3 forward gears at the time. Some were sold, but it seemed the Renault funding meant there was a greater emphasis on racing as a means of promotion. A cabriolet version was produced, but only around 650 were ever made. The A108 that replaced it was on a back burner until A106 production ended in 1961. The new model used the Gordini version of the Dauphine engine, with differing power outputs depending on whether the customer chose a larger 904cc engine or not. In 1960, the convertible and 2+2 model were produced. They were longer than the coupe and used a new chassis with beams at each end to support the engine and steering. The Berlinette Tour de France model had a different front end, with the headlights being integrated into the front wing, but little else changed throughout its production. The A108 also sold in small volumes, but helped cement Alpine's place in the industry. Willys also sold a version called the Interlagos in Brazil, and over 800 were sold in 4 years. Alpine's next car, the A110, was probably the best known model from before their reboot. The A110 went on sale in 1963 using Renault 8 engines. With a fiberglass body, it only weighed 620 kilos, meaning its 51 horsepower engine wasn't too weak. A Gordini version of the Renault 8 engine nearly doubled the power to 95 horsepower, and by the end of production, A110s could be had with 180 horsepower from engines mounted at the rear. The A110 really made a name for itself as a rally car, having lots of success in the early 70s, winning the Monte Carlo Rally, and Alpine became World Rally Champion in 1973 under the new WRC. The A110 was Alpine's bestseller at the time, with over 7,000 being made, and it was also made in Mexico and Bulgaria by manufacturers affiliated with Renault, and it was produced in Spain by FASA, who also produced Renaults. The A310 replaced the A110, and it had a very different body shape to its predecessors. It had a rear-mounted Gordini 4-cylinder with 125 horsepower, but due to its size and weight, tipping the scales at over 800 kilos, it was considered underpowered and didn't sell well. A cheaper model called the A310SX was made to try and shift more units, and it was a simplified model with only 95 horsepower. In 1976 it was restyled and used the V6 PRV engine, also used in the DeLorean. With nearly 150 horsepower, it was considered a 911 rival, and sales were much improved, but they tailed off due to the lack of improvements being made in the next 8 years of its production. The GT version was later made with a more aggressive design, a limited edition model named the A310 V6 Pack GT Kit Boulogne had 190 horsepower due to a large capacity of 2.9 litres. The A310 sold well considering its shaky start, but it was clear that Alpine were unlikely to become a mass market brand, with only 11,500 sold in its 13-year lifespan. In 1973, Renault bought Alpine and began making a number of reforms, moved Alpine towards motorsport and away from road cars. They were merged with Gordini to form Renault Sport, and became more dominant on the track, with them winning the 1978 24 Hours of Le Mans. They also began working on Formula 2 cars and built an F1 test mule, which led to Renault joining Formula 1 in 1977. The GTA, as it was known in the UK, was essentially an updated A310, as it used a similar design and the same V6 engine as before. There was greater room inside, and it had a very aerodynamic shape, which combined with 158 horsepower meant it was faster than rivals like the Porsche 944. Variants included the GT, which was the base version, the Europa Cup, which was designed for racing, and the V6 Turbo. It had 197 horsepower, although this fell for certain markets due to emissions restrictions. The Mille Milles and Le Mans limited editions were made with slightly different appearances and wheels. The GTA USA was a V6 turbo adapted for US regulations. Renault planned to partner with American Motors as they owned a stake, but by 1987 they had sold their stake and had to sell the US versions to buyers in France. Only 12 were ever sold to customers, with the whereabouts of the other 9 being unknown. During the 80s, Renault also delegated the production of the Renault 5 turbos to Alpine. In 1991, the A610 replaced the GTA. Whilst it looks similar, the only shared external components were the windows. It used the same PRV engine, which was enlarged to 3 litres, which meant it produced nearly 250 horsepower. The A610, however, would be the last car Alpine would make in over 20 years, with the last model being made in April 1995. They would instead be used to make sporty Renaults. Having made the Clio Williams a couple of years prior, they would introduce the Renault Sport Spider, the V6 Clio, and the Renault Sport Clio 172 and 182. This wasn't to say there wasn't an attempt to bring back the brand though. After a previous concept called the A710 was cancelled, the Z11 Burnett was developed in conjunction with Lotus and was meant to be shown at the 2001 Geneva Motor Show. But this never came to fruition, although some images of it have surfaced in recent years. Another concept called the W16 was developed. It was a small SUV based on the Renault Wind concept, but like the Z11 it never went any further. The Renault W19 was based on the Nissan 350Z, using its drivetrain and chassis. The project was however cancelled as well. The first concept that actually made it past the drawing board was the Alpine Vision. It was demonstrated in Monte Carlo in 2016, and 2017 was the year promised for Alpine's return. The name was revealed at the 2017 Geneva Motor Show, shortly before it went into production. When the A110 did make it into production, it used a 1.8 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder and an all-aluminium body, making it weigh in at just 1100 kilos. The lightweight and nearly 250 horsepower meant it can do 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. It came in 3 trims: Pure, which was the base trim; Legend, which had sports seats with leather upholstery and specially designed wheels; and the Premier, which was limited to 1,955 models at launch. It had forged alloy wheels, leather Sabelt seats, and a reversing camera. The A110S is a lighter and faster version of the standard A110, with nearly 40 extra horsepower and a slight decrease in weight. It has a slightly faster 0 to 60 time of 4.4 seconds. The A110R is a track-focused version with more horsepower and a 34 kilogram lighter weight due to the use of carbon fibre across the car, from the wheels and bonnet to the seats. The fixed rear spoiler and front rear splitter provide extra downforce, but the R can still get to 60 in less than 4 seconds. The A110 has been a success, with many calling it the best sports car on sale, and definitely at the price point where it's taken on and even outshined the Porsche Cayman. It is likely that the next iteration of the A110 will be hybrid, as the Eternity prototype has already been tested, and Alpine signed a deal with Lotus in 2021 to develop EVs together. The next A110 has been promised for 2025, and it will be interesting to see how light they can make it, even with the battery and motors that electric cars require. The next Alpine, however, will not be an A110 replacement, but instead an electric hatchback. The A290 is not your typical electric runabout, with this one having a noticeable rear spoiler, wide arches, and 3 seats with a central driving position. Alongside this, Alpine and Michelin have designed 3 bespoke sets of tyres for the car, aimed at offering the best grip on track or in snowy conditions, or a mix of durability, performance and range. The full details of the A290 have not yet been released, but it is due for production late next year, with the official reveal likely to happen in spring 2024. So what a story, a man modifying Renaults to a brand making one of the best sports cars and signing deals with big names to try and bring some excitement to the world of EVs. Alpine have become a well-known name within a decade, and are leading the way with engaging electric cars. It seems not all hope is lost.